My name is Chris Obzanski. I'm a coach at the Park City Ice Arena and a former internationally ranked ice dancer. I'm filming this video because a lot of us coaches are unemployed right now due to the coronavirus, and our students are sitting at home doing nothing, so we're trying to find some ways to film some videos to keep them busy and keep them in shape. So I thought I'd do a video on foam rolling. As a coach, my muscles get super tight, especially after a long day of coaching. And to top it off, I drive quite a bit, so I travel between rinks, and what will happen is I'll warm up my body, I'll skate for a few hours, and then I'll hop in the car and my muscles stiffen up. So I developed some pretty major muscle imbalances. So let's talk about muscle imbalances real quick. So muscle imbalances are when one muscle is super tight, like your quad, and the other one, like your hamstring, the opposing muscle, is super loose, or there's not much tension in it, or it's not firing. So we get these really tight muscle imbalances. And these muscle imbalances lead to structural deficiencies. One of these deficiencies is something called lower cross syndrome, and that's where your back arches, your hip flexors are tight, and your butt's kind of sticking out. And I see this a lot in skaters, and in fact I have this as well. And if I don't take care of it, if I don't manage it, my performance is severely affected. I won't get the extension that I want. My glutes won't fire the way I want, and my power is severely diminished. So one of the things that helps with this is foam rolling and releasing the knots, or these tight muscles. So I'm going to demonstrate a few exercises that helps me really release these knots. So let's start. You're going to need a few things. You're going to need a foam roller. You're going to need a little peanut, possibly. Yeah, that's really effective. You could use a little ball and maybe a foam block. So we're going to start on the mat. What I like to do is I like to put my foam roller down, and I like to start rolling out my calves. And one of the reasons we want to roll out our calves is because when we have this posture, it's usually because we have tight calves and we can't push our hips forward because our calves are too tight. So we're going to start with the calves. We're going to start rolling those out. So I put my calves up on here, and I just I like, there's probably different theories, but I just like to roll along to kind of warm the muscles out and kind of get a feel of what's going on in my calf muscles. I'll start it like right on my Achilles, and I kind of work my way up, and I like to find spots that are tight. And so, since I've been really stressed out because we're unemployed, and who knows what's going to happen with this virus, my body's like really tense. So this is great for loosening this up. So anyway, I usually find a spot, and right now I'm tight right here, so I'm going to hang out there for about 30 seconds and just kind of let that muscle release. And by letting that muscle release, I'm gonna be able to get more extension through my legs, and I'm gonna feel just a lot more relaxed. So anyway, I'm just gonna hang out there, kind of roll the sides. You can roll the sides, and maybe you'll find a different spot that you're tight. You roll to the other side. Anyway, I'm pretty tight because I haven't really done anything the last few days, so this is really good for me. Alright, so then after I've done my calves, I like to take my legs, kind of stretch them out, take my feet and kind of get a little bit of a stretch here. Stretch it out. Take note of what you feel. Maybe it's still really tight. For me, I'm still pretty tight, so I'm going to roll it out a little bit more. Especially my right leg, so I'm going to put my foot up and kind of press down on it. Try to get that nice relaxed feeling. Sometimes, rather than going back and forth, you can go side to side. So I just found a knot right on my gastrocnemius, which is like that big muscle that sits right here. And I'm just going to kind of roll back and forth until that loosens up. be uneven, I'm going to do the other side just for good measure, even though that side's not very tight. So yesterday my wife and kids and I, we all went bike riding, and of course I didn't warm up or cool down, so my muscles got tight from that as well. So this feels really good. Alright, so now the next thing that's super tight for a lot of people, like with this lower cross syndrome where we have this arched back, is our hip flexors. So what's happening, rather the opposing muscle, the glute, isn't firing, so this gets tight and pulls the hips back. So what we're going to do is, remember, we're going to loosen up our hip flexors. So I'm going to face the foam roller. I'm going to put my hip on it, and I'm going to just kind of hang out there until it loosens up. You can again go side to side or back and forth, and then when you find a spot, you start just hang out there. Alright, I'm going to do my other side. Found a spot that's really tight. This is, most mountain bikers or cyclists have really tight hip flexors. So, you know, this exercise is great for people like that. And from a skating perspective, if we have really tight hip flexors, then we can't get that full extension that we want. What happens is we get there and it kind of locks up, so we have our hips back and our leg kind of goes off to the side, the foot turns in. If we can really stretch that hip flexor, then what happens, then we can get that turn out, we get the hip pushing forward, and we have a really solid edge. And I'm going to keep working on my hip flexors for a second. You can also take your foot and kind of get into a little bit of a quad stretch from here. Good measure, I'm just going to roll down my quads a little. Alright, so we've been talking about the lower cross syndrome. Again, that's our hips back. Another thing that causes that stiffness, or that imbalance, are also our adductors. So now we're going to put the roller like that, and we're going to roll out our adductors. And for skaters, this gets really, really tight because, you know, we're pushing through our legs, so it's usually our pries formis and our adductors are really tight. And the other side, flip around. So when I do off-ice training with little kids, I oftentimes notice that when they do their squats, rather than having their knees over their toes, what will happen is they'll collapse inward. And that's usually because these muscles are extremely tight, the glutes aren't firing, the back's arched. So what we're trying to do is loosen these muscles so that we can get lined up over our toes. So when I watch skaters, what I'll see is I'll oftentimes work on their extension, and rather than having their knee right over the toes, it goes this way. So they collapse their inside edges. So what's happening, they're developing extreme muscle imbalances in their abductors, but they're also putting a lot of pressure on their meniscus and MCL. And over time, if it's not corrected, they can end up with some major issues in their MCL. I'm one of them. I don't think my coach ever noticed that. And for years, I think I had a little bit of pronation because my knee occasionally flares up. So I really have to watch my alignment as I skate. All right, let's move on to the next muscles. We've worked on our calves, we've worked on our hip flexors, we've worked on our adductors. So now we're going to move to our lats. So when we have this lower cross syndrome, right, our lats are really tight and pulling up. And so that's pulling up on our back, pulling our hips up. So we have to loosen up our lats as well. So we're going to put the foam roller on the ground. And we're going to start rolling out. Find that spot that's a little tender. So your lats extend from about here all the way kind of down through here. So we're going to start at the bottom and work our way up. And again, when you find the spot, just hang out there for 30 seconds until it releases. See, I'm really tight right underneath my shoulder, so I'm going to hang out there for a second. Kind of work side to side until that starts releasing. Alright, I'm going to go to the other side. I'm going to flip around so you guys can still see me. For fun, I do adult pair skating, and so I do these overhead lifts, so my shoulders get very, very, very tight, and so I really have to loosen them up in order to keep the range of motion in my shoulders. I talked a little bit about doing this because we don't want to develop muscle imbalances, but we're also doing this as a preparatory to stretching. So if I were warming up in the morning, what I would do is I'd take a foam roller, I'd start warming up, I would kind of get a sense of what my body's feeling, and then I'd foam roll, loosen up those tight spots, and then what I'll do is I'll go into either my active stretching or my dynamic stretching, depending on what I'm doing. If you're just starting off in fitness, most of the time you'll go into static stretching, but we don't want to do static stretching right before we get on the ice, because that usually diminishes our power a little bit. Alright, so then I'm going to work also on this part of my back, loosening this up. So again, we have that arched back. We're going to loosen this up. So we're going to put this on the ground. We're just going to just kind of roll out a little. Get that, go to that lower back and kind of roll out. Move to the other side. So this is where I like to use some of the other gadgets. So I have a peanut, and I also have a ball. This one's a special hyper ice ball, and it's great because it also vibrates. But I'm not going to use that function today. I'm just going to lay on my back. I'm going to put this right above my hip bone. Right between my hip bone and my rib cage. And I'm just going to kind of hang out and roll out a little. And loosen up those muscles in there. And on to the other side. Sometimes I fall asleep here. Okay. You can also take this peanut and put your vertebrae right
through your spine right between these two walls, and that helps loosen it up. So I'll put that right there, and I'll just I'll find a good spot, and I'll just kind of go back and forth with my hips. So I'm driving my hips up, I'm engaging my glutes. By engaging my glutes, my hip flexors are going to release. As we talked about earlier, if these are tight, we're going to get that arch back, so we want to engage the glutes and just kind of go back and forth and get that movement. Again, we're kind of working through our range of motion with the hips. And then I kind of work my way up. So I'm going to go side to side as well. Get a little different stretch. And then I'll keep working my way up. So we've talked a little bit, let's review real quick. So we loosened up our calves, we've loosened up our adductors, we've loosened up our hip flexors, we've loosened our lats, and we've kind of worked the lower back a little. One other stretch I like to do, or one other muscle release thing I like to do before stretching, just kind of maybe wind down my day. I like to take a block, and I like to put the block on the ground, and then I'll put this peanut on top of the block, and I'll just kind of put it right here on my neck. And that kind of, I'll rock back and forth, and that loosens up all of this in here. So, and I'll just kind of sit there and take a few deep breaths, try to, unwind, especially after a long day. Kind of roll back and forth. Take a few deep breaths. Try to think about something positive, and just relax. And then I'll kind of scoot it down a little, find a different spot on the neck, and roll out. And then when I'm done, just kind of take a nice little stretch forward, just roll out a little, or stretch out a little, take my neck, go side to side, let that tension release. And then from here, if I'm warming up for the day, I'm going to start moving into my dynamic stretching, my active stretching. Or if I'm unwinding for the day, so say I've done a hard workout, I'll go into my static stretching. And so anyway, to recap, we've loosened up our calves, abductors, hip flexors, lats, and we did this so that we can kind of start correcting this lower cross syndrome. I'll be presenting some other videos on upper cross syndrome, which is shoulders forward, head out. I'll also do it on pronation as well. So I'll create some more videos on that. Anyway, thanks for joining me. I'll see you soon.